Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're looking at a string of events that are, well, they're as horrific as they are entirely inexplicable. I gotta warn you up front, the data we're about to review is profoundly disturbing. This is a grim, step-by-step reconstruction of an anomaly that just tore through a metropolis, leaving behind a wake of unimaginable devastation and really bizarre, unconnected tragedies. Our focus begins in April of 2011, in New York City. Now, New York is a place where literally millions of stories are happening simultaneously every single second of the day. Because of that sheer volume, most events kind of just fade into the background noise, right? So when these horrific incidents first occurred, the NYPD viewed them exactly like that. They thought, okay, these are isolated incidents, just a tragic weekend in the city that never sleeps. But when you step back and actually look at the timeline and the data, a much darker, far more organized and deeply bizarre pattern emerges from that background noise. Okay, let's dive into this. We are looking at a puzzle that absolutely defies all traditional investigative logic. Think about this. How exactly do the brutal assault of a cab driver, the blunt force trauma death of a zoo animal, and a hypothermic drowning in the East River all trace back to a single apartment across the water in Hoboken? I mean, as disconnected as they sound, the thread tying them together is terrifyingly real. To understand the sheer scope of this, we've got to look at the raw data. The scale and the horrific variety of these anomalies over just one single weekend it's staggering. First, we have a cab driver found wandering Central Park, deeply traumatized after an incident of mutual sexual assault. Then Harlem locals subjected to vile racial slurs by a group of wandering men who, by the way, also blocked an ambulance with a stolen vehicle. At a senior citizens' home, elderly residents were found inexplicably euthanized in their beds. Then came the true anomalies. A young man hung by his own belt in a Manhattan Denny's. A prized panda at the Bronx Zoo found deceased from blunt force trauma. And finally, a young man identified only as Ron, pulled from the East River, dead from hypothermia. Now, for over a decade, these were just cold cases gathering dust. But when investigators tracked the security footage, the geography of the crimes formed a dark, undeniable path. Let's map this out. It started in the evening with a disturbance outside the Pacha nightclub. By midnight, the escalation hit Central Park without assault. Late night saw the chaos move up to Harlem. The early morning hours brought the irreversible tragedies at the senior home and the Denny's. And by dawn, the gruesome discoveries at the zoo and the East River. It was basically a geographic wave of destruction. Building on that timeline, investigators found physical clues linking the locations together, these seemingly random, almost absurd breadcrumbs that tied all the cold cases together. So, the suspects were recorded screaming at disoriented girls from Rutgers and William Patterson outside of Pacha. Across the city, they left a trail of ripped basketball nets scattered on the pavement. Near the Manhattan Denny's, police found the half-eaten remains of literally an entire bakery's worth of cake. And everywhere they went, at every single crime scene, they left behind one specific, vibrant calling card: empty, brightly colored aluminum cans. And this brilliantly illustrates the turning point of the entire investigation, because those cans, they belong to For Logo. In the context of this timeline, this wasn't just a beverage, guys. It was a discontinued, heavily caffeinated malt liquor that acted as a volatile, toxic weapon. It fueled a pregame that simply never ended. You see, it wasn't a coordinated crime ring. It wasn't a traditional serial killer. It was a blackout bender that weaponized its participants, leaving a terrifying calling card at every single scene. Section 1. The Mastermind Unmasked. Crossing the Hudson. So the paths of destroyed property, severe trauma, and empty aluminum cans didn't stop in Manhattan or the Bronx. Security footage tracked the perpetrators straight across the Hudson River. Investigators pivoted over to Hoboken, New Jersey. And, they were expecting to find a hardened criminal, right? Some mastermind hiding the shadows from a violent past. But instead, when they knocked on the door of the Hoboken apartment, it was answered by a guy in a cut-off tank top, casually sipping from a camo print can he called Dom Energy. His name was Dom Mazzetti. When asked about taking the PATH train into the city and the events at Pacha, his response was utterly disconnected from the gravity of the situation. He just said, "Oh yeah, man, we pre-gamed the night, started crushing them in the apartment. Stood outside Pacha, updated our Facebook statuses, drunk, couldn't wait to eat Chipotle later." He was literally chewing food while he said this, perfectly relaxed. When investigators pressed him on the police reports from Central Park, remember the deeply traumatized cab driver, Dom actually chuckled, and he provided this quote: "Yeah, an altercation arose, ended up taking the cabbie into Central Park, raping him, and then we had him rape us all back. It is what it is." The chilling juxtaposition here is just incredibly hard to stomach. the horrifying, violent reality of a mutual sexual assault met with the absolute chewing-while-talking apathy of the perpetrator. It's wild. And the interrogation continued right into the Harlem disturbance. When confronted with the horrific racial slurs hurled at locals, Dom offered this really casual admission. He stated, "We talked about it, went up to Harlem, used the N-word a lot. I'm not too proud of that. 4 locos is crazy." Notice the structure of his defense right here. He admits to the vile behavior, but immediately shifts the burden of responsibility away from himself and directly onto the caffeinated malt liquor. Now, the devastation wasn't limited to strangers either. It infected their own group. The coroner reports indicated that early in the night, one of Dom's own friends actually suffered a seizure. When asked about this collateral damage, Dom casually admitted that his friend had to duck out early due to the medical emergency. But rather than seeking help or, ending the night, Dom stated that they ruthlessly continued on, claiming they did it because it was what their seizing friend would have wanted. This absolute detachment peaks when confronted with the most bizarre and senseless act of the night: the Bronx Zoo. Investigators asked him directly about punching a prized panda to death. And his response? Well, it requires a moment to fully process. He said, "The panda, I just lightly punched it until it died. Wasn't a big deal." I really want you to focus on the utter absurdity and cold horror of that statement. The deliberate, repetitive action of lightly punching a large animal until its heart stops, framed as merely a casual inconvenience. Remember, 2 of his friends died that night: the young man hung in Denny's and Ron, who drowned in the East River. Confronted with the complete totality of the night's death toll, Dom sighed, but not with remorse. He sounded mildly inconvenienced. He offered this final, chilling confession: "I'm sorry he died. I'm sorry they all died. I'm sorry about a lot of things I did. It was a good night. I'm just a guy trying to have a good time." It is the ultimate monstrous defense of a pregame gone completely out of control. Just zero accountability, zero remorse. Which brings us to the staggering injustice of this whole case. On one side, you have the scale of destruction: a trail of bodies, severe trauma, euthanized elderly, a dead panda, and destroyed property. On the other side, the consequences? Zero. Dom Mazzetti sat in his apartment completely unfazed, entirely shielded by the impenetrable armor of bro culture and blackout drinking. He was never charged. The NYPD lost the paperwork, or perhaps the system itself simply could not comprehend the sheer, chaotic gravity of what a 4 Loko bender could actually produce. Well, the paperwork may be lost, but the physical evidence remains. The trail of brightly colored cans, the ripped basketball nets, and the autopsy reports. All of which leaves us with a dark, provocative question pulled directly from the case files. As you look at the destruction left in the wake of this anomaly, you really have to ask yourself, exactly how many light punches does it take to stop a bear's heart?